It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Have we been too hard on Ted Leonsis? Didn't think that's how I'd start the show today, did you? That's a question we're going to explore a little bit coming up in just a few minutes. Leonsis on the Woj pod over the weekend. Very, very interesting conversation. We're going to play you a little bit of the sound in less than 15 minutes. We start, though, with the Commanders, and they have canceled their final OTA practice for tomorrow. And actually, Anthony Haney, super producer of this fine radio program, I have not been on Twitter a whole lot today. Is the internet freaking out over this, or are people handling this like responsible adults?
I haven't looked in the comment section per se.
It's not Wednesday, so we're not doing.
Nah, it's not. But I think
because I can hear it now. Maybe I'm just too online, but I can hear like the who do they think they are? They can't afford to miss any practice.
Yeah.
And whatever. The fact that they got 2 practices suspended and they're now missing basically a week of practice, I think is far more damaging than missing 1 once the 2 are already gone. The analogy I'll make on this is it's kind of like going to the gym. Doing one single workout is not going to help get you to whatever goal it is that you want. Stacking them will. There's a reason, like if that's, no single workout matters, then what's the point in ever doing it? Well, because you keep building and you build and you build. If you want to do a Lego set, you do 1 Lego a day. You miss 1 Lego, it's not catastrophic. But if you never do any building, that's not going to work either. And back to the gym analogy, and really this is where it's direct to what the Commanders are doing. Like, the only workout that you regret in that particular scenario is the one where you get hurt. And so if you do, the way one workout matters is you tear something, you strain something, you pull something. And then it's like, oh, okay, well, that one really mattered in a negative direction. No single workout can have a catastrophic positive impact, or that's not really the way English works, but you know what I'm saying. Whatever the positive version of catastrophic is, that level, no single workout can do that. No single workout can be the one that makes you ready, that makes you stronger, that, hits your weight loss goal, that hits your weight gain goal, whatever it is. It can be the one where you tear your pec. And so if you are the Commanders and you feel like you've stacked a bunch of good days, you're happy with where the team is, and you don't want to risk the bad one, especially considering the luck this team has had with injuries the last couple of years, you have some meetings. You continue to refresh and refine. You probably weren't going to get that great of attendance from veterans anyway, because you already did the mandatory and they can get their vacation started a week early. The workout, no single workout day, but 4 days of extra vacation. Let's go. 1, 2, 3 Cancun. Or wherever. 1, 2, 3 Italy. 1, 2, 3 South Africa. 1, 2, 3 whatever. This is like the biggest break football players get in the entire calendar. There's 8 weeks until week 1, I think. No, it's a little longer than that. But we're not that far. It's like 8 weeks to the preseason, I think. And we now know we are about 6 weeks from training camp, as the Commanders also announced today that training camp will open July 27th. But them canceling a single practice is a bummer for, I think, some of the younger guys who might have gotten some extra reps. A lot of those guys aren't even going to make the team. And making sure that nobody gets hurt is the most important thing. You're safely now in the summer. It's a non-story to me. I really was hoping we could get Michael Phillips on the show today, though, because I do want to know if Phillips had already thought about making his way up here from Richmond, and if he himself was personally afflicted by the somewhat late cancellation of this practice. This is what I would like to know. But Michael said he was busy today, so he can't come on. So, Michael, I'm just putting this out there. Maybe I'll even cut this clip and put it on Twitter. Michael Phillips, are you personally affronted, afflicted, affected by this decision? Because no one on the actual football team is. No one that matters, if you will. With all due respect to all of the end of roster guys that matter as human beings to their families, friends, and to the world at large. They are not going to impact the winning and losing of the Washington Commanders this season. That's no big deal. Anything to add, Anthony, that we need to cover on this front? Or did we explain why this is not a big deal and why we're not going to talk about it for the rest of the show?
I think you did a great job for those who, because initially I did think us canceling this practice was a little bit shocking, but it was also voluntary. It wasn't a part of the mandatory minicamp that they had last week.
Correct.
So now that I'm understanding that it was a voluntary session, and the fact that the analogy you use, going to the gym, one time and working.
So you like the gym analogy?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I probably would have said, going to the gym one time during the week and never working out again, like that doesn't necessarily do anything for you.
Right.
I mean, I guess you do something to your muscles on that one day, but outside of that, it doesn't really do too much.
If you got a date afterwards and you want to pump, sure.
Do some push-ups real quick.
You ever done push-ups in the parking lot before a date?
Not before a date, but I've done it before parties, before weddings, things of that nature. Like the last wedding I went to, we actually did some push-ups.
We need to. This should be our top story today.
I don't know why we got a deck, but literally every time our fur brothers get together, we get a deck of cards and we go through the entire deck and we do push-ups every time. It's not a one-off type of thing. It's literally all the time.
I have lots of questions. Can you mark this down for tomorrow at some point, like 4:45 tomorrow?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, excellent. Apropos of none of that, we'll react to Ted Leonsis' comments on the Woj Pod next.
Daniel Snyder has agreed to sell
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. So we had a lot of audio last week. A lot of conversation was had between Michael Winger and Will Dawkins and Ted Leonsis. They all gave interviews, including to us here at the Team 980. Russell and I had a couple of great chats. Leonsis was on with Grant Danny as well. But sometimes you just get a different conversation and hear something and you think it's worthwhile playing, and kind of reshapes how you think about some things. That was the conversation I had when I listened on the way into work today of the Woj pod. And I saw a bunch of clips making its way around Wizards Twitter over the weekend. But Adrian Wojnarowski, who was in town for the press conference, and it is what it is. I actually asked Woj if he would be willing to come on the show. And I said, I know you're here to do interviews, not be interviewed, but, would you, got some funky stuff happening on the stream here. Let's remove that. Okay. It's not take command time. Anyway, the point is, I asked Woj if he would, you're here to do interviews, not be interviewed. And he's like, I appreciate you asking, but I think I'm going to pass on this time. I was like, okay. But I also knew that Woj would probably be contributing to the show because he, the man knows how to get answers. That is why he is him. And people are very comfortable talking to him because he is a holder of information. And thus the answers he's going to get out of certain people are just different than the answers anybody else can get. It's a skill in the interview space. And so he sat down with Leonsis. He also sat down with Winger. And the stuff Leonsis said was pretty fascinating in a couple of realms. But there's also a little bit of revisionist history that I feel like Ted did that I think is worth revisiting, framing. I don't even know if it's revisionist history. Just rosier than should be painting of what was, forgetting a few convenient details and doing it while also saying this, which I think is the most important thing that was said pretty much all week last week, which is, Ted Leonsis, how'd you do as an owner these past dozen years?
Did you have to take time to do that, to say, I want this to look different?
Oh, I'm sorry, you gave yourself what?
Yeah, I gave myself failing grades.
If he realizes the things he's done is a failure, that means everything is on the table. And that is the most important thing. Now that I have not had, since he decided to fire Tommy Shepard, any reservations about the fact that Ted had put everything on the table. This is someone who very clearly wants to win. I think he is driven by that as well as driven to make money. He is definitely a business-minded down the rebuild path before, and they did the thing that we wish they would have done a couple years ago here, where they traded multiple All-Stars. Obviously, they did ultimately trade John here, but they traded Karan and Gil and Anton back in the day, and they wind up getting 4 straight top 5 picks. And the funny thing is when Ted recounts that stretch, he says, well, Wall was the number 1 consensus pick. Yep, he was. No problem with it. And then he says, we got Bradley the next year at 3, and then we took Otto the year after that. And we were the first team to draft and then max 3 guys. And what I hope Ted realizes is that, one, there's a year missing there, which we'll get to in a second, and that's the revisionist history a little bit, or just a mistelling, condensing it, whatever. I don't know that he did that on purpose, but it's pretty significant to get the 4 right. But there's also a reason that a team like Oklahoma City, who came as close to doing what they did as any team over the last decade and a half, where you have those multiple picks years in a row, did not do it the way Washington did. They picked. They had Jeff Green, Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden back to back to back to back to back. And they chose to trade Green and trade Harden. Some would argue they traded Harden a year too soon, but they knew they had to do it. And what that did was give them a decade of competitiveness until Durant decided to leave. And so bragging that you signed 3 guys to max contracts isn't actually the flex that you think it is. Although, again, because Ted did say the magic words,
Yeah, I gave myself failing grades.
then I'm willing to at least be open to the fact that he thinks that was a mistake. Now, it is also very much worth pointing out, not to be a jerk about it, but like, you also drafted Jan Vesely at 6 in 2011, and that's a big, gigantic whoopsie. Like, that's the one that kills you because you have Wall already, and here's a couple of guys that went after in that draft. Kemba went at 9. That's probably not a fit with Wall, but whatever. Clay goes 11. Kawhi goes 15. Even Nick Vucevic goes 16. Jimmy Butler goes 30. Alec Burks, who's like a good player and has played the entire time since he's still in the league, went at 12. The Morris twins went 13 and 14. So Jan Vesely's a pretty big mess up at 20 or at pick 6 in the middle of what was otherwise, I think, 3 solid picks. Porter is always going to feel wrong in that 2013 draft, but that's just a weird draft. It's one of the worst all times. There's 2 dudes who were like really good in that draft, maybe 3. Giannis, CJ McCollum, and then Rudy Gobert. But Giannis, McCollum, Gobert, the 3 top players in that draft by a decent amount. I think they're the only guys that have really made all-star teams. And you're talking about guys like Steven Adams, KCP, like obviously a very good player. He's about to win another ring. Otto, but like there's no real definitive like, oh man, you missed your 3rd star in that draft unless you want to say Giannis. McCollum, obviously you're not drafting the year after you draft Beal. And Gobert went 27. So it's not like anybody knew he was going to be what he is. Giannis, nobody knew either. But there's some people that had some inklings. And so if you wanted to swing big. And that's, I think, the other part of this that's really a bummer is you start to look back through the draft. And Ted said immediately after he said,
Yeah, I gave myself failing grades.
He said, we thought we wanted to build through the draft, and so we did. And he gives kind of his version of what I've just given you. And then he says, slowly but surely we abandoned the plan. And what I think is interesting about the draft picks that ultimately followed, and specifically the ones in the Tommy Shepard era, is they took no swings. Like Jan Vesely, whether it was because Vesely so scarred them that they decided never again or whatever other reason, they took no swings. They took super safe players year after year in places where other teams were willing to swing a little bigger, and some of them hit after the Wizards did. And whether it's a Troy Brown Jr. or Rui Hachimura, Denny Avdia to an extent was that. Denny's a little bit of a bigger swing, but I don't think anyone looks at Denny and is like, that's a future superstar. Like there's not enough risk taking. And also I think there's this thought that with a guy like Johnny Davis, like, his floor is this, so we know we're at least getting that, and then we'll see about the ceiling. And it's like, that's not how this works. There's no guaranteed floor in this league. Often guaranteed floor guys actually aren't that good because there's inherently, the way we talk about them, some kind of lack of physical ability or talent. Now, Davis might break that mold a little bit because I actually think Davis is a high upside based off some of his athletic profile or whatever, defensively speaking. But we'll see. We're going to table the Johnny Davis conversation for later. But guys like Troy Brown Jr., it's like, he's just a solid player. Otto Porter, solid player. We know what he is. And it's like, okay, cool. Does that mean what you think it means? And that's how you get stuck exactly where they did. That, and they locked themselves in to Wall, to Beal, to Porter. And they thought that was enough. And as a result, they make these short-term moves to the point that in 2016 and 2017, they didn't have not just a first-round pick, they didn't make a pick in either draft. And so sacrificing we have a team that could, get into the playoffs and they're probably going to lose in the first round. If we add a Bogdanovich, we can get to the second round. It's like, okay, are you really a championship contender? Or maybe you should hold on to that first round pick. Maybe you should actually get the young player on the rookie contract that gives you some sustainability over time. And that's where things went so far south. And you get stuck in this middle, which is kind of what Ted talked about as well with Woj.
I feel more that because we didn't have a plan, we're very opportunistic. Trade deadline would come, I get briefed. These are the kinds of moves that we would consider making. And then there'd be another last-minute phone call, and bang, a trade would come before you, and they'd say, this is what we're doing. And what are you going to say? No, don't do it, of course. And you'd end up with a player, and now you had to rejigger what the plan is and the style is because of the player that you got. And we made a lot of trades. We've signed so many players. We dressed so many players through the last 3 or 4 years, but we ended up with the same record.
Yeah, they just kept staying in place. And part of that was because they'd acquire players all of the same type and same caliber that had no upward mobility. They were never getting the players that were going to get better. And what that left was a fan base with no hope, which is something Leonsis addressed. I want to play that for you next. And then also I'm curious, as you hear Ted talk and hear me kind of talk about this, but especially this next bite that I'm going to play you from Ted in the next 5 minutes, does it change your opinion of where we are now? I mean, a lot of you had hope anyway, but does it maybe ease any remaining concerns to hear Ted Leonsis admit, yeah, I failed as an owner? 301-230-0980. We'll take your calls on that next. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube too. youtube.com/@theteam980. So Ted Leonsis says he's failed as an owner. This, again, from the Woj pod over the weekend.
Did you have to take time to do that to say, I want this to look different?
Yeah, I gave myself failing grades.
And I would say, let me reword that. That's not Ted saying he's totally failed as an owner, but like clearly his role in where the Wizards have been the past couple of years, he feels like he could have done better. It's worth the full interview because he talks about, Woj asks really good questions, and Ted and Woj clearly have some sort of relationship that Leonsis feels fairly comfortable answering them. But he talks about, the being stuck in the middle. He talks about some of the challenges of how they've got this organization set up that are maybe a little bit different. He talks about some of his goals and some of the mistakes he's made along the way and perhaps allowed to happen along the way. But to me, this was the biggest kind of, outside of the admitting that he's failed in his own, which he did to an extent with Grant and Danny as well. There's a great clip where Grant's like, hey, well, what do these guys know? And like, what's the formula? How do you crack that with the Wizards when you've done it with your other franchise? And he says, well, if I knew, I would have done it by now. That's another way of admitting what he admitted here. But one thing that I appreciate about Leonsis compared to, say, Snyder, now there's a lot of things I appreciate about Leonsis compared to Snyder. This is literally the lowest bar. But Dan always, it felt like he reported to no one. Like Dan did what Dan wanted for Dan at all times. Ted, I think at times perhaps is a little bit, might have his eyes on the money more than a fan who is not running the organization. And whether you see that as criticism or like smart business, I'll leave in the eyes and the ears of all of you. But like he is running a business, and of course that's going to impact things. But he certainly is someone who's like, well, we could also make money off of this or get more eyes on our TV network or whatever he does, as opposed to kind of this singular focus on winning that fans have, whether the fans actually have the right ideas in terms of how to get that done or not. But the fact that Leonsis does feel responsible to fans is something that is different than a lot of sports owners who tend to adopt this "it's my team, bleep all of you" attitude. They are stewards, though. It's so funny because I sometimes art and real life mix, and there is I couldn't remember for a second whether this was an actual team owner talking or a clip from Ted Lasso, but it's a clip from Ted Lasso. And I was watching, my wife and I were watching it last night. Got two episodes left in the series, so we're almost caught up. And the season finale and what is probably the series finale still to come. But the Super League episode is the one that we watched last night. So spoiler alert if you're way behind on Ted Lasso. But they have this idea of a Super League, a la the real idea of the Super League in soccer. And Rebecca Walton, the character in Ted Lasso who owns AFC Richmond, the team that Ted Lasso coaches, gives this beautifully written speech about that is clearly also not just art, but is their kind of stance of how they feel about sports as the writers of the show, and a reflection on our actual society about we are stewards of the game. This is a game at the end of the day. This is something that all of us came to because we loved it, not just because we want to make money, not just because we like the power, but because at the end of the day, we are stewards of this thing, this game, this child's game that is played at such a high level that 20,000 of us are, now I'm mixing my monologue here and the one in the show, but if you're a soccer stadium in the top flight of England, 80,000 people come see because this child's game that we all love so much is played at such an extraordinarily high level. And so when Leonsis said this to Woj, it was a bit of an eye-opening moment and something that I respect Ted for a lot.
I was very patient with the Wizards organization. I've only owned the team a dozen years. It's not like, this is a forever thing. But I was frustrated, and I think was reflecting to how I felt I'd let down the fan base. Everyone needs to know who they report to. I have to report to somebody. I have partners, but I'm the main owner. I have to report to the fans. And our fans have been loyal. Our business is good. We're one of the largest, in terms of revenue, sports organizations on the planet. But I don't feel like I was giving the fans something to fall in love with, to cheer for authentically. We weren't giving them hope and promise.
A lot of people have asked me, and I don't know, hate to make it about myself. It's very anti of what the journalism feel like. My broadcast journalism degree feels like it's creeping back towards the people that gave it to me for me even bringing this up. But it's been asked of me, so I'm just going to address it. There are people that have asked me if they think my interview with Tommy Shepard had anything to do with him ultimately getting fired. And I've always said no. Like, Ted is making evaluations based off of what the basketball team is doing, what direction that they're going. And then I heard that answer. And it's not, I don't want credit for any part of this because I don't want, the proverbial blood on my hands. I'm not trying to do interviews to get people fired. But at the end of the day, like, I'm the reason that I do interviews with people that are in power is for accountability. The reason that I do those interviews is because, and why I take them very, very seriously, especially at a point where the team is at kind of a critical point in their trajectory, is because you, the fans, deserve answers. And what struck me about the interview I did with Tommy is not any particular back and forth we had. And I know everyone loves to point to the, so you're not a big Kyle Kuzma fan thing. And hilariously, I didn't realize remotely how big that was going to blow up, in part because I thought he was joking, which probably honestly saved me from having a different reaction. But that clearly struck a chord with fans. And the preaching of patience after 4 years of not making anywhere close to a significant playoff run really hit a chord with fans. And so in that way, the fan backlash, not anything, if the interview exists in a vacuum without how people react to it, that interview might not have moved the needle at all. And I still don't know that it did. This is me now speculating, reading into what Leonsis was selling Adrian Wojnarowski. But I do think that the way all of you perceived that and ultimately very vocally made your voices heard did probably plant a seed in Ted's head somewhere that, like, hey, we got a disgruntled fan base and we better have a plan to fix it. And then what ultimately leads to him moving on from Shepard is the fact that Shepard could not present a plan. That much Ted was very, very clear on. They continued to meet into the offseason, and ultimately they did not have a plan that he was happy with, if they could come up with a plan at all, and thus he makes the change and he goes outside the organization. But the groundwork for that, whether it was the interview I did or others, was the fans going, this ain't it, Ted. And he hears that. And that's a good, healthy relationship to have. Not that you can be reactive all the time, because you have to understand the plan and understand your team's timeline and be able to deal with some parts that aren't going to be super fun. But when you're having those nadirs in support, and on top of that, you don't feel like you have a way out, that is absolutely the time to make a change, and that's what Leonsis did. Take a couple calls on that, at least one, 301-230-0980. Let's see what Bob in D.C.'s got to say, and then if we got more calls, we'll take them on the other side of the break. Bob, thanks for holding through my talking there. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I couldn't agree more with your statement about that floor guy. That's exactly what it is. And it was pretty refreshing to hear Leonsis say that, because I was listening to that press conference as well, and I've always wondered why we can never get free agents to come here, especially when most of the league is from here.
Right.
So that's really all I had to say.
All right, Bob, thanks. Yeah, I mean, during the presser last week, he says, like, we need to figure out how to make D.C. a destination. And something that I thought was interesting in the Woj interview as well was he, I think, really would love to get a high-caliber point guard in here, because that guy, and I think they saw this with Westbrook, and I do wonder if that's another move that really kind of upset him. He liked having Westbrook here because what Westbrook did was got other guys paid. Like, you play with a John, you play with a Russ, those assist numbers have to go to somebody. And so part of the reason Brad gets paid is because he plays with John and he plays with Russ, and they give him the contract, and now he's playing with, all due respect, Monte's a very good NBA player, but he's not those guys. And we see the numbers don't look the same. That is the reality of the NBA. And so, part of being a destination organization is not just your medical, not just your facility, not just your coaching staff. It's who do you have on the roster, obviously. And that is something that this new front office, Will Dawkins mainly, but obviously Michael Winger as well, and Travis Schlenk have to get right, is who's the guy who's going to have the ball in his hands, and is that someone that other NBA stars want to play with? That's how you become a free agent / general NBA, whether forced trade, player acquisition destination. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube, youtube.com/@theteam980. When we get back, what else happened this weekend? Plenty of other DC sports news. And then Kevin Sheehan's going to join us at 5 o'clock. I joined Sheehan's show before the NBA Finals to preview it, so we're going to complete the home and home. Sheehan on with us talking NBA Finals and a little Commanders at 5 o'clock here on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Sheehan at 5, Glenn Consor talking NBA draft at 5:30. And how was your weekend, man?
I got a tan actually. I was in Atlantic City this weekend for a flag football tournament.
Mm-hmm.
I played despite having
You got a hamstring deal.
Yeah. But it didn't tweak up, or it didn't tweak or anything like that. So
That's good.
I think for the next maybe month, I'm just gonna stretch, ice, apply heat, and then August I'll be back for our next tournament.
Yeah, we can probably add some things to that routine that can help you out.
But yeah, I'm supposed to be talking to you about some hamstring stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk.
Yes, sir.
It's a different show. That's gonna be the Train with the Best podcast this week. Fixing Anthony's hamstring. Actually, it would be a fun episode.
We need
Case study. We can get Chris on the horn. We could do that. All right. I played a lot of FIFA this weekend.
Ooh.
I forgot. I just had this moment where for those that have been listening to the PlayStation saga for a while, my wife and I started watching Drive to Survive, the Netflix show on F1, and then I decided I really wanted to get the F1 game. So I've been waiting, and eventually just pulled the trigger, got the PlayStation, and then we realized that the F1 game doesn't come out until Friday this week. This week it comes out. So I was just sitting there with a PlayStation that didn't really have any use. And then I remembered that FIFA is my favorite video game that I've ever played. And so I downloaded FIFA, and I started a career. And your boy's a striker at DC United, and I'm scoring a lot. I've had a very successful start to my young career in career mode. I'm probably going to set the MLS record for goals scored. But I'm not going to just obsess over it and do it every day, because unlike when I was a young single man who just played video games like fresh out of college, I have a wife now, and she deserves my attention. But I did, because she had a bunch of stuff to do this weekend, and I was just chilling at home. So I was like, I am going to be responsible and fold the laundry and do the dishes and then play FIFA. And boy, did I. So that's what I did this weekend.
Sounds like a lot of fun. I want to play a game of FIFA. I want to see how. Granted, I haven't really played FIFA since I was in high school, which is about 9 years ago. But I still remember how to play. I know what formations I run. I know how to,
You can cross-play Xbox to PS5 on FIFA, I think.
Really?
I think I saw that on there. So if that's the case, yeah, we're gonna play.
All right, better say less.
All right, so we could definitely stream that and get views.
For
sure. We're gonna work on that.
Is Rachel gonna be trash talking me?
I think that's a distinct possibility.
Oh man, okay.
I think if I gotta check how that works, but I think that there's a good chance that she will, whether on a headset or just in the background. I don't currently have a headset, but would I get one for my wife to trash talk you while playing FIFA?
Sounds
Absolutely.
Yep.
That's a good investment.
Yep.
That is a good use of my money. All right. As for actual soccer this weekend, speaking of DC United, they lost 3-1 at Atlanta. Less than ideal, but they're still in the mix in decent playoff position. Spirit looking good, getting back on it. They had a really, really bad first 10, 15 minutes. I was at that game on Saturday night. Yeah, Saturday night. Really, really bad first 10, 15 minutes against Angel City, but held on. And then they just kind of wrestled the game. It was such an interesting game, Anthony, because it's one of those where you're watching your team play and you're like, this is going to be bad. And then something good happens and you're like, maybe that's the thing that turns it. And then there's kind of a back and forth. And then eventually they were the better team for 50, 60 minutes in that game, and then had to hold on the last 20 where it's a way more back and forth and they have a 2-1 lead. Almost one of the greatest goals in league history was scored in this one. There was a misplay by former Spirit defender Paige Nielsen, who's now with Angel City. Misplay on a ball where the goalkeeper had been way out to take a free kick, and Ashley Hatch nearly kicked it in from midfield. Just one time, left foot, unloads it. She got a little bit too much underneath it.
Dang.
And also, for so many balls when they hit the turf at Audi Field, like hit and skid.
Mm-hmm.
This one, for whatever reason, the spin she had on it just caused it to kind of die when it hit the turf. It was incredible hustle by Didi Hericic, the Angel City goalkeeper. But yeah, almost scored from midfield. Ashley Sanchez, beautiful header of a goal. Hatchie did have another goal. So 2-1 ultimately the final score there. Excellent job. Also, shout out to Nicole Barnhart. 41 years old, has to come in. Aubrey Kingsbury, the Spirits keeper, who hopefully is going to get named to the U.S. national team for the World Cup this week. We'll see. That roster announcement could definitely come this week. So good, fingers crossed on that. But Obbs got concussed because someone ran into her head while she was making a save, and she had to come out of the game. And Nicole Barnhart, who hadn't played in an NWSL game in over 600 days, like we're talking almost 2 years, she comes in, closes out the game, Spirit win. They're second in the table. Excellent. Nats, not a great weekend, but they finally did end the skid. They had a game, like last week, their first game against Philly, against the Phillies. They win. They tie Philadelphia in the standings, which is crazy because Philadelphia was in the freaking World Series last year, and the Nationals are not even the middle. They're in the start of their rebuild. And then they lost the next night and kept on losing. Eventually, they end the six-game skid. Say that 5 times fast. Say it once. 6-game skid. And notch a win over Atlanta on getaway day yesterday. They are off, and then ultimately on to Houston. And then I mentioned this in trending, but there's been so much talk around the Mystics this year about how Elena Deladon is so healthy. Like there was even like a video vignette, I guess, that they played during the commercial breaks during some of the Mystics games. And it was like, oh, Elena, well, how was your off season? It was amazing. I got to train because I wasn't rehabbing. And here we are 8 games into the season, and very unfortunately, she's back on the shelf. She's got neck tightness, neck stiffness. Good news is Mystics got 2 huge wins. They've been really inconsistent to start the season, but they go to Seattle. They beat them on Friday. Jewel Lloyd comes back on Sunday. It's Sue Bird's retirement jersey retirement, and the Mystics are able to go into that hostile house on a day where everyone's super fired up and wants to win for Sue and get a massive win. But they do it with Deladon getting hurt. So, I mean, they're third in the East right now. They should be fine, hopefully, as long as she's back relatively soon. They've obviously got other players who can step up. Shakira Austin's having a phenomenal sophomore season. Ariel Atkins is an Olympian. Like they've got players, but they're not championship caliber without EDD. So hopefully she can get back for them. But real bummer over the weekend after a whopping 8 games of health. Unfortunately, Elena Deladon is back injured. So that's what else happened this weekend. Of course, we also processing Game 4 of the NBA Finals, preparation for Game 5 tonight. Is this going to be the last game? We will ask Kevin Sheehan that question and break it down next on The Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always alive as well on the free Odyssey app. Talking hoops with Glenn Consor at the bottom of the hour. Obviously, the new Wizards execs, and Glenn's also got his eyes on the NBA draft. But right now, we're talking hoops and perhaps a little bit more with our guy, Kevin Shin. Time for today's Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in. Not My Beat.
Top story, of course, being the NBA Finals, possibly concluding tonight. But, Kevin, I'm going to give you dealer's choice because I want to talk Wizards with you, too. You want to start with the Wizards or start with the Finals?
Let's start with something that's much more fun to talk about, which is the NBA Finals.
Okay. I don't know. I have fun talking about the potential for hope for once.
Let me just tell you, I'm not sure either one really moves the needle in our town right now, but I'm more into the NBA Finals, even though the Wizards are a way up on my priority list personally.
You want to talk about canceling an OTA practice? What are we doing?
Why did they? I mean, Ron was so adamant the other day. Hey, just want to remind everybody we are definitely practicing next week. Yeah, I think they found out that a lot of people weren't going to show up with them. And that's the easiest way to kind of say, hey, we gave them the day off.
Yeah, I don't. It's a 0 out of 10 for me. Do not care.
Yeah.
Like, okay, cool. All right, so let's talk NBA Finals. When you know, there was a lot of stuff that we talked about when I was on your show before this series, and you know, one of the big ones was how Miami would keep up offensively with Denver, but whether it was by slowing Denver down or the ability to score themselves. When I've watched this series, I feel like Miami's inability to consistently score has been the biggest factor of why they're down 3-1. What do you think the biggest factor is?
Well, certainly in the 3 games that they've lost, I mean, they have shot very poorly from behind the arc. In the one game that they won, they were 17-35. They're 32 of 99 in the games that they lost. So their role players, guys that can stroke it, Strus, Vincent, et cetera, you know, have come up really small in the last couple of games. The funny thing is, I think that the game they won, game 2, I felt like the change of inserting Kevin Love into the starting lineup and putting Jimmy Butler and Jamal Murray was actually the most significant thing in winning that game. And that's hard to say when a team shoots 17 of 35 from behind the arc. But what's been interesting to me, Craig, is Jimmy Butler basically was exclusively guarding Murray for pretty much the significant majority of game 2, and that has not been the case in games 3 and 4. And it's not like Murray got off in game 4. He had, 15 points at 12 assists, but his game 3 was unbelievable, as was Jokic's game 3. But yeah, to answer your question, if the Heat had shot better the last 2 games, they would have been more competitive games. But I also give Denver credit. I think they've played 2 of the better defensive games they've played all postseason long in their last 2 games.
No doubt about it. To me, like it underscores also the one thing. I don't want to say I'm questioning Eric Spoelstra because he's one of the 15 greatest coaches of all time, and I host a radio show. But it does question of like, okay, where could he tweak things? Where does he potentially make changes tonight? If I'm Spo, I'm playing Love more minutes and I'm playing Duncan Robinson more minutes because those are 2 of my more reliable offensive players, and I know Denver's just going to score anyway. Obviously, Tyler Hero is available tonight as well, upgraded to questionable, expected to play. Do you think that gives Miami a better shot if they go that route, or is that just asking to lose, 130 to 115 instead of the scores they've been losing by?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's ironic. I mean, they gave up 108 in game 2, but I felt like by far and away was their best defensive effort of the series. I mean, they totally disrupted Jamal Murray in that game with Jimmy Butler guarding him, and they forced Jokic to score a lot of points, but he wasn't the let's see if we can get this right. I am really
the
stuck
facilitator.
On this one. That's what it is.
Yeah.
I am a little bit tired right now and a little bit in the weeds right now with my podcast, but I'll get back to that.
Okay.
Could not talk there for a second, but I don't know, Craig. I think that I think overall Miami's got to be physical and they've got to defend if they're going to have any chance. Or even if they make shots with Duncan Robinson out there, it's going to be difficult for them to, hold them to a number that gives them a chance to win.
Yeah, I just think it's tough because you're just not beating Denver scoring in the 90s. And unfortunately, like you said, it's been guys like Strus and Vincent and Caleb Martin, who was incredible in the Eastern Conference Finals, who haven't been able to score at all, and that's part of Miami's problem. Kevin Sheehan's with us here on the Hoffman Show. Of course, you can listen to the Kevin Sheehan Show 10 to 1 every day on the Team 980 and the Kevin Sheehan Show podcast as well. I think the other, we talked about Murray and Jokic, but like one of the things that kind of coming out of this series, assuming that Denver does win it, is how good is Jamal Murray? We all know Jokic is MVP caliber, but is Murray being just sensationally elevated by Jokic? Obviously, they're a tremendous fit together. Or is this guy one of the best 5 point guards in the NBA at this point? And the only reason that we don't think of him that way is because he had an injury that derailed him for 2 years when he was clearly on that trajectory with the 50-point performances in the bubble. And we see him again doing what he's doing in the finals.
I think that's part of it. I think if we had seen him for those two postseasons, I'm not sure Denver wouldn't own another title or have been at least in the finals. He's a great scorer. He's a great player, but Jokic makes it easier for everybody. And his screening is kind of underrated. The dribble handoff is a big part of what creates a lot of space for Murray. I've loved Murray's decision-making, Craig, the last couple of games. He's been an absolute fantastic passer and has made all of the right decisions. And, when he really got it going in various games in this postseason, they're such an unselfish team that they look for him, and that's when he'll get into volume shooting, but it's because the rest of the team is all for it. I think he's a great scorer. I think he's a really good decision maker, and I think the injuries probably are what kind of prevent us from calling him that. But I think a lot of people after watching this postseason are ready to go there anyway.
As they should be. I think he's got 10, 10, 10, or 3 10s and then 12 assists in the 4 games, if I'm remembering correctly, which is definitely not his MO, but you see what he can do as a scorer and how he leverages that. Is there any other player to you in this series that has really stood out, has shown you something that you didn't know they had, or has stood out in a way that you didn't expect?
You mentioned him already. I think Duncan Robinson's really proven to me that he's much more than just a shooter.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed watching him. Look, great shooters when defenses are trying to run them off the 3-point line. Some guys can't, show the ball, head fake, and put it on the floor and make a play. And he's done that consistently, really over the last 2 series. That's been impressive to me. And clearly, some of his minutes wouldn't be there if Tyler Hero were playing. I like Duncan Robinson. I think he's more of an overall offensive threat than just as a shooter. And then I think Aaron Gordon on the other side has been phenomenal. I thought he was great, obviously, on Friday night, but I think his defense has been great. The one matchup that Jimmy Butler won't go at offensively is Gordon. You'll see whenever Gordon's on Butler, he tries to get, a ball screen and get a switch to get somebody else on him. I think Gordon's been really good. Those would be the two that I guess I've always liked Gordon, but I've always considered Duncan just a one-trick pony, and I think he's developed beyond that.
I think that's such a good point. Gordon is the guy I thought you would say, but I'm glad you brought up Robinson because he was a one-trick pony. That wasn't like some figment of your imagination or anybody else's that's described him that way. This was a guy that would like catch the ball and then pretend that he was allergic to it and get it out of his hands as soon as possible, either getting a shot off with a ridiculously quick release or just give the ball back and run back the other way around the same screens he just came from.
Right.
And now this is a guy that's evolved his game. And like, if I'm Wes Unseld Jr., I'm locking Corey Kispert, who has already shown some flashes of doing the similar stuff, but like I'm locking Corey Kispert in the film room with Duncan Robinson tape and being like, that can be you. And I think the evolution of his game is really impressive. And frankly, could either save his time in Miami or get him another role on a bigger role on another team if they decide to move him this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, not to mention the fact that when he wasn't playing, he was never a problem. That's part of their culture, I guess. Everybody accepts their role. Look, these playoffs. You and I talked about it before. It's been an incredible level of basketball, and for me, incredibly dramatic from the start to where we are. I mean, Friday night was a letdown. I would have liked to have seen Miami figure out a way to at least make that game more competitive, and I hope we get a really tight, close game tonight, because we've only had one close game in this series. And that game, by the way, was put away late, and Denver made kind of that late run to get back into it. But I'd love to see a great basketball game and a thrilling basketball game, because these NBA finals have been, maybe what some projected, which was, two teams that not everybody was looking forward to seeing. Denver's been great to watch, but I'd love to see another couple of games if we can get them.
Same as well. Basketball's been such a high level. It's like there hasn't been any massive blowouts, but there also hasn't had the late game drama that you'd hope out of an NBA Finals either. It's kind of been in this weird 8 to 15 point spread seemingly from the second quarter on in every game. Kevin Sheehan's with us, of course, Team 980 and the Kevin Sheehan Show podcast, as if you don't recognize the voice. So what I did want to ask you about Denver and kind of the way they're built, and specifically the patience that they've had. It's something that, of course, gets referenced last week with the Wizards, and I'm sure in every NBA market that's not playing right now, people look at what Denver did and admire them for not pulling the plug on whether it's the players or even someone like Michael Malone, a very, very high-level coach who everyone knew was a high-level coach. Sacramento pulled the plug on him and thought it was incredibly stupid at the time, and Denver hired him straight away. And they've stuck with him even though they haven't gotten to their ultimate goal. Why is it that you think they've been able to do that, and why more teams aren't willing to have the kind of patience that they've had?
Well, for starters, you've got a player who's elite. You've got an elite superstar, and if you have one of those, you have a chance to win a title. You got to go back to 2004 and the Pistons to find an NBA champion without an obvious or at least debatable top 5 player in the league. The other thing too, Craig, is they've been winning. They've won 50-plus games a couple of times, and when they weren't winning 50-plus, they were winning in the high 40s. That's easier to stick with. I listened to Ted talk about Denver too, but they're not comparable to the Wizards. They have a truly elite superstar, and by the way, another guy who's really, really good. And both of those guys are a lot better than the number one player and the highest paid player on the Wizards team. And the Wizards can't have that much patience when they're losing 45, 47, 49 games a year. The Nuggets have been in the playoffs for 5 straight years. They were, without Murray, those were legitimate reasons why they didn't go much further. But they've had great regular seasons, and they have a superstar on their team. They've got a top 5 player on their team.
So I think, obviously the Wizards contrast is we do that because we're here, but I contrast it with a team like Philly, right? Because Philly also has that player. It's Joel Embiid, the guy that finally beat Jokic for the MVP this year. But Embiid, who has also won 50 games a bunch. Actually, I'm looking at it now. I think Philly, let's see, Denver's won 50 games this year, and they won a 2018, 2019. Obviously, you got some funky seasons with COVID and everything in the middle. But
right,
Denver, or Philly's won 50 this year, 50 last year. They won 50 back-to-back years in 17, 18, 19. Joel Embiid will now be on his 3rd coach in that stretch, and Michael Malone's been there the whole time. And I admire, and I wonder how much of it has to do with the media market and, Jokic's personality versus any other superstar that maybe is a little less patient. But I just think it's fascinating that they said, no, we're on the right track. It's hard to win. We have to keep tinkering, but let's not mess up the stuff that's working. When so many teams like a Philadelphia 76ers will be no, we got to change the coach. We got to change some of the key players as opposed to trying to stick with a plan.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm trying to think. Before Doc, was it Brett Brown?
It was Brett Brown. No. But if you want to look at,
okay.
I guess Milwaukee moves on from Budenholzer this year, right? Same kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Monty Williams being moved on by Phoenix,
Sure.
I don't get that at all because I considered him to be a very good coach. I'm not a big Doc Rivers fan from an X's and O's standpoint, never have been. So I kind of understand that move, but I don't, it's a good question. They're winning lots of games, and yet they keep swapping out the coaches. I mean, I don't know. There's a big difference for me watching Denver and watching Philadelphia. Philadelphia to me plays a style of basketball that I think makes a lot of old school basketball fans cringe, whereas Denver, it's really, really pleasant to watch them play, to watch a team so unselfish, to watch 5 players involved in a lot of possessions. Whereas, you watch Philadelphia and you watch James Harden, essentially dribble the air out of the basketball and create. Look, he's a great shot maker. And some of that sometimes is entertaining to watch. But I thought that 76er Celtics series was one of the worst series of the postseason. But I don't know what the answer is to your question. I mean, look, it's our next football owner.
Yep.
And I think he made the right decision on the coaching swap because I think Nick Nurse was outstanding and consistently got more out of less in Toronto. And I think sometimes that's kind of a really good measure for how good of a coach is, how good a coach is. But, I don't know. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with personnel.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the funny thing is I agree with you on Philly this time around. Where I think Philly messed up was the Brett Brown one. I think Brown got them out of the process and was a smart guy that kind of understood the roster.
150 a few times, right?
Yeah. And, whether it's moving on from Brett or letting J.J. Redick get out the door when he was still so good with Embiid and, obviously the Jimmy Tobias stuff. Like there's a lot of mistakes that got made there that are, if they had just been like, nope, we're good, like stick to it as opposed to continuously zigging and zagging, maybe they're at a similar place to where Denver is right now, who just kind of maneuvered around the edges. All right. Speaking of the local teams, real quick, what were your impressions of not just Winger and Dawkins, but some of the commentary that Leonsis made last week, including what he said to Adrian Wojnarowski on his podcast, where he's like, "Yep, I failed in my role in this as well." Does that give you hope, or are you in just, man, I've been a Wizards fan for so long, Bullets fan for so long that I'm going to need to see some results before I have any palpitations of hope in my heart?
Well, first of all, I thought Dawkins and Winger were impressive. Okay, but what does that mean? I mean, I actually thought Albert Hainsworth was super impressive in his introductory press conference back in 2008 or whatever year that was. And by the way, he was. But I listened to that Woj pod with Ted, and and there was some, self-reflection, and there was, a self-evaluation of giving himself kind of a failing grade. There was also a little bit of throwing Tommy Shepard under the bus too, and, talking a little bit too much. I'll tell you what, going back to the press conference, that was a Wizards press conference. I thought, with Ted to a certain degree, we got a little bit too much about Monumental and the behemoth, media giant they've created, I guess. I mean, I don't know if that's true or not. It's not relevant. I mean, Wizards fans want to hear about the basketball team. And I don't really personally care if Monumental's become a media giant and because of it, he said we're an it kind of a franchise. Like, we've got the it factor. I mean, come on. I mean, this basketball franchise has been a disaster. But I was impressed with Will Dawkins in particular. And everything I've read about Winger, I'm super impressed with. And I have to give Ted credit because I feel like this offseason, it feels like a big swing. It feels like we've been, I was just expecting a general manager to be hired to replace Tommy Shepard. And they made 3 big hires. And by the way, JT3 was elevated. And it seems like a different approach and a big swing for Ted. I don't care how young and how edgy they are. That doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that They're competent and they know what they're doing, and everything I've read speaks to that. But the bottom line, Craig, like in all of this, is somehow they have to land a top 5 superstar. And there's good fortune in that. Milwaukee, some good fortune that Giannis was there, at 13 or 14, wherever he was, where, good fortune that Kawhi Leonard was where he was. And then, by the way, was available for Toronto to acquire him and win a title. I think they've drafted exceptionally well when they were in OKC together, but they have to somehow combine keen insight and outstanding evaluating talent and skill with perhaps some good fortune to end up with a contender.
So that's the thing that I really want to follow up on with Leonsis on is, like, do you when you talk about the plan and Shepard failing to have one, like, is it about a plan to quote unquote win with big old air quotes, or is it like, this is how we get a top 5 player? Because if you don't have a plan for that, then you don't have a plan to win. And the air quotes are there forever, and you're talking about making the playoffs and like, woohoo, we made playoff gate, and congrats, tell me about the profit margins. Which, like, I also get why Ted cares about the profit margins, because it's actually his money. But for the rest of us who just want the wins, like, if you don't have a plan for that, which is going to involve some level of luck, and really not even that, Kevin, if you don't plan on relentlessly pursuing that, that's the thing that I think was missing under Shepard and Grunfeld was, we can get a little better and maybe make the second round. It's like, no, forget that. Relentlessly pursue getting a top 5 player, and that's the commitment that Ted has failed to make in his dozen years running the team.
He talked about a transformational free agent in that Woj pod, going back to the early years of, he almost said that they set it up to draft John Wall. I don't know if I think that's a bit of revisionist history, but let's just go with that.
He also forgot about Jan Vesely's existence, which I thought was actually genuinely hilarious.
And the transformational free agent that they were trying to set themselves up for, it was KD in 2016. It was all in for Kevin Durant in 2016. And anybody that had been paying attention knew that Kevin Durant was never coming here. And, in the process, they had actually developed a pretty decent basketball team, not a championship contender, but a team that was for a period of time capable. Now, with Wall and Beal staying together, making progress as players, being healthy, and some of that got away from them. But I still believe, and I don't even think this is debatable. I think Randy Whitman, from an X's and O's standpoint, was by far and away the best coach they've had here in the last, 10 years. And those teams were legitimate Eastern Conference Finals contenders, but not championship contenders because LeBron was in the conference.
Right.
So that wasn't going to happen. I don't know the best way to go about getting the next LeBron or the next Giannis, looking at 2 different draft positions completely. But there's a little bit of good fortune, but obviously you take your shot at having top 3 to top 5 picks for a few years and hopefully landing on that guy along with 1 or 2 others like they did in Golden State or like they did in OKC when, it was Durant, Harden, and Westbrook.
Yeah. And,
by the way, they didn't win a title.
No, they didn't, but I will take 10 years of having a chance.
Me too.
That's the generational contender piece that Winger was talking about for sure. Kevin Sheehan, 10-1 each and every day here on the Team 980 Kevin Sheehan Show podcast each day as well. Always appreciate your time, sir, and have a great rest of your week, and good luck with whatever else you got going on the podcast that you graciously allowed us to interrupt.
A couple things to get done. Thanks for having me, as always.
You got it. See ya. Kevin Sheehan, everybody, with us here on the Team 980. So how do they acquire that next player? Perhaps through the draft. Is there one that perhaps is slipping through the cracks that could fall to them at 8 this year? We know Wembanyama at 1 is supposed to be. A lot of people think Scoot Henderson, who's going to go 2nd or 3rd, could be as well. Brandon Miller out of Alabama. What about someone who could fall to 8? Glenn Consor's been on his draft study habits. So we'll talk to Glenn about that, about the draft, about the prospects, and about what he thought about Winger and Dawkins next. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app.
Celebrate summer in D.C. with the team.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Joining us now, a great friend of the show I got to see in person last week. He harangued me and said, "When am I coming on?" And I was like, relax. How about Monday? How about Monday, Glenn Consor? How about Monday?
Monday doesn't work for me. You got any other options?
Oh, Anthony, this is really awkward. Really awkward.
What about the day after Sunday?
Day after Sunday, Glenn. Day after Sunday.
Whatever you say, Craig. Whatever you say.
How are you? How's your weekend?
Weekend was great. It was great.
Excellent. So I want to talk NBA draft with you. I have not really started my draft prep. We've had so much going on, obviously, with the Wizards, and I've been busy with Commander stuff as well. And to me, this is one of the most fascinating NBA drafts we've had in a long time. And I'm curious, as someone who's evaluating things from a media standpoint, and obviously kind of mirroring the process that teams are going through, how has it been evaluating the prospects in a draft where so many players, really for the first time in this kind of mass, are not coming out of college basketball, whether it's Overtime Elite, G League Ignite, obviously a lot of overseas players? How has this draft process been different for you to analyze and break down?
Yeah, I mean, it's different, but it's the same to some degree because there's always the element of the unknown. When you have a lot of guys coming out of all those entities that, Craig, that you just mentioned, they're not really proven. But what I will say is I think that this draft is loaded with athletes. It's very athletic. I think the first 15 players, you could hit on somebody, and like you always can. So I think from that aspect, it's the same. But you got guys that I think what we're seeing every year and year that goes by is one and done players, and those guys sometimes are hard to evaluate.
Yeah, no doubt. It's so interesting that, instead of, okay, we have a kind of a level established of they can do this in Division I college basketball. What does it mean when they're doing it in the G League, at Overtime Elite, et cetera? Obviously, everyone's number one player is Victor Wembanyama. I'm going to guess that he's also your number one player. There's a lot more debate about number two between Scoot Henderson, Amen Thompson, Brandon Miller. Who's your number two player in this draft?
Ooh, that's tough. I like Scoot because I think he's so explosive. And I think he's got just tremendous upside and skill set. Not a great shooter yet, but, I've seen it before, and we'll see it again, guys developing shots with time, with the right coaching. But I like Scoot. I like Miller. Also, you could make a case to have him picked at 2, but I love Cam Whitmore, man. I would love a local kid coming here, but I don't know if he's going to be available.
Yeah. Glenn, what are the skills for you as an evaluator that you look at and you're like, we can work on that, versus skills where you're like, that's not up to par and it's never going to be?
Yeah, it's funny. I was an NBA scout for 7 years for the Pacers. And I look at, I've been in meetings where, guys getting drafted because of athleticism, because of a certain skill set. I like coachability, I think, and I think you got to be competitive and play with an edge. So I look at those three things. You got to be competitive, you got to play with an edge, and you got to be coachable. That's the key. I've seen so many guys come into this league, that are skilled, but they weren't coachable. They struggled with that. They didn't play hard every night. They didn't work hard in the off season to get better. So I look at those intangibles.
Glenn Consor, of course, analyst on the Wizards Radio Network, analyst from Monumental Sports with us here on the Hoffman Show. We still got 20 days left, so I'm not going to hold you to this. But as of right now, on June 12th, who's the one guy where you go, I want that guy available at 8? Obviously, we're taking Wembanyama and Henderson off the board. We know they're not going to be. But anybody that realistically could be that you're like, that's the guy I want to see for the Wizards available.
Well, I think the four guys that we just mentioned are, to me I'm most excited about. But, you just don't know, Craig. I think the fact that there's that many athletes in this draft this year, that are really good players too, makes it more difficult. But what we always see every year is the surprise pick in the top 10, and which means someone's going to slip. And, that's where I would get excited, and I just don't know who that's going to be.
Why do you like Whitmore so much? Why is he a guy that stands out for you?
Man, he could shoot. He's athletic, and he could shoot it. And he's explosive, and I think he could defend multiple positions at his height. I like it. He's got a big, strong body. His body's NBA ready. So I like Whitmore. I like Scoot Henderson. I like those types of guys.
The guy that I've been reading up on that's been mocked to the Wizards a lot in like media mock drafts that I am super intrigued by is Anthony Black out of Arkansas. What do you make of him so far through your evaluations?
Yeah, I mean, I watched a lot of tape. I mean, he is a skilled. He has, Craig, a Lonzo Ball type feel for the game. Like he's got a unique feel for the game at a point guard position at 6'4". So he's a point guard. I mean, he's a legit point guard in the NBA. He's got to work on his shot, but it's not horrible. But he can get in the paint. He's got a great feel, high basketball IQ kid, and I like his athleticism. He understands how to play. He's got a great feel, and when you have that unique of a feel for the game, I think that quite often gets overlooked in an NBA draft.
Yeah, that's the thing that I find fascinating about him, Glenn, is his basketball IQ seems to be just off the charts, and not just, people watching him on tape, but, it's kind of some of these like pre-draft processes and different workouts and evaluations that these guys go through. Was there something in your time as a scout that you found incredibly valuable from like a data collection, not necessarily numbers data, but even anecdotal data standpoint to try to judge how much of that feel, how much of that kind of natural ability will translate to application at the NBA level?
Well, it's interesting. Playing point in the NBA has changed, because you got to be able to score now, Craig. Like think about all the great point guards now in the NBA. They all score.
Yeah.
Like they're almost like score first point guards. So it's really interesting. So you got to do both. So I think that aspect has changed. Look, like a guy like Steve Nash in his heyday, man, the guy could score. He wasn't crazy athletic, but he could score, and he had an amazingly high basketball IQ. I'm not saying Anthony Black is Steve Nash, but he's got that kind of feel.
We use the term athleticism in such a funny way, and we all do it, right? It's like who can jump. He's got a 40-inch vert, crazy athlete. Well, if he's stiff as a board going side to side, like how useful is that in the NBA? And there's also, the idea of recency bias and how an NBA Finals affects a draft that's a week or two later. Seeing what Jokic is doing and seeing what a guy like Murray is doing, and Murray's a fantastic athlete, and Jokic, people don't realize it, is a phenomenal athlete in his own way. It just looks different. Yep. And same thing with Murray. Like, he's so methodical and practical and precise. Do you think that'll change how teams look at players with the recency bias in this case, because of maybe looking for something different than they traditionally have, actually maybe help some evaluations?
No, I think so. I mean, that's a good point, Craig, because, so many guys came into the league and have changed the way, guys evaluate draft picks. The NBA is now positionless, right? So you got guys like Draymond Green and, what's LeBron James? What's his position?
Basketball player.
I think exactly. So you got so many guys now that have just a great feel for the game. DeMar DeRozan is in that category too. Great high basketball IQ. What we're seeing with Jokic is one of the most unique players that you and I will probably ever see in our lifetime. He could handle the ball. His footwork, he's unflappable. You can't rush him. Now, when you when you evaluate point guards in the NBA, you look at that. Can he be pressed? Can he be rushed? You don't even think about it with big guys. Because big guys, when they're rushed, they can kick it out. That's what you look at. Can they kick it out and find somebody when they're double teamed? Do they make the right basketball play? This guy, you can't rush him whatsoever. It doesn't matter what you do. And he could play high post. He could play low post. You forget he's a post player. He has scored more points in the post than any other player in the NBA. But it almost doesn't look like it because of his basketball IQ. And the thing that jumps out at me most about Jokic, Craig, is that he is completely selfless.
Yeah.
He's a team guy. He doesn't care how many points he gets. He doesn't care how many shots he gets. It's legit with him. A lot of players talk about it, but with him, he doesn't care. He wants to win. And it's rare to have a guy like that.
Super rare. And it's something that I also wonder as teams, watch what Steph has done for the last decade, what Jokic is doing, Giannis. A lot of these guys in recent NBA history have shared that trait and how much that becomes a part of the evaluation. Real quick, Glenn Consor, who's, of course, the Wizards radio analyst and is with us here on the Hoffman Show. On the way out, away from the kids to the adults, what'd you make of Winger and Dawkins and the introductions? You got to spend some time with them, with Wes on set, on the TV side of things. What'd you make of Dawkins? What'd you make of Winger?
I love them. I love those guys. I think that the fact that they have hired three guys that have been proven to execute strategies to rebuild, strategies to restructure, all that stuff. They've turned their teams around in their own ways. OKC and the Clippers with trades. And, I think it's a real nice blend of some unique talent there.
No, I agree. I'm very excited to see what they can do. And then, hopefully we'll have some good basketball to call next year. You and Dave mostly. And then maybe you guys will let me back for a game or two.
Yeah, Dave's been, talking to me about that. And I want you on, and Dave's a little hesitant, so I got to work him. I got to work him a little bit, but I will. I got you, man.
If there's one thing I can trust, it's your work ethic, Glenn.
There you go. I got you.
Excellent. Great to see you last week. We'll do this again soon, especially as we get towards the draft. Thank you.
You got it. All right, Craig. See you, buddy.
See ya. Glenn Consor, everybody, with us on the Hoffman Show. When we get back, something Ted Leonsis told Adrian Wojnarowski that I think could impact this draft in a good way for the Wizards. I'll explain next on the Team 980.
Here's what's trending on the
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Take Command coming up at the bottom of the hour. Special Monday sneak previews. I'm going to give you guys a gift. Normally we don't do, we actually done it 2 weeks in a row, but that very, very special. Very rare that we give you a true sneak peek of Take Command before it is out to the podcast audience. But because I'm only here Monday, Tuesday this week, I'm feeling magnanimous. I'm feeling nice. So we'll do that for you coming up at 6 o'clock. Logan and I answered some really interesting mailbag questions. You'll get a couple of those questions and answers coming up at the top of the hour. Right now, though, back to the Wizards and following up on the conversation we just had with Glenn Consor, and we've obviously been playing some of the sound from Ted Leonsis on the Woj Pod all show long. And there was one bite in particular that I thought was really interesting, and I can't fully decipher what Ted meant by this. I don't know if this was a shot at any particular player currently or recently on the roster, but it's very, very clear that Ted understood that when John Wall was here, that was good for the winning. And it, in his mind, I think, did make Washington more of a destination than it currently is. And I think he would like to get back to that, which we'll eventually circle back to the draft with this. But this was pretty fascinating, especially the last 20 seconds or so of this from Ted Leonsis. First 30 is also interesting, but here's Leonsis on kind of, he was asked about the differences between the NHL and the NBA, and this was part of his answer.
The biggest difference that I see between the NHL and the NBA is that there's so much money to be made at the high end in the NBA that you have to be very thoughtful, mindful, and smart about who you're signing, and then teach that player to be magnanimous because they got paid. And now you should be about team success and helping other players, to get paid. One great thing about having a great point guard is that he would make players get their points and they would get bigger contracts. That's one of the ways that you become a destination. That, hey, I'm going to go play for this team, we'll do well, but my individual stats will increase.
The one quibble I will have with Ted here is the use of the term point guard, because I think over-obsessing with the position on the day, or, this was recorded last week, a week before Nikola Jokic leads the Denver Nuggets to a title, that dude's helping a lot of other people get paid. But, it's an interview answer. It's not like he's given, at least I don't think, like super great thought to that in that level of detail. But the idea that you have someone, right, whether it's a LeBron James, a Nikola Jokic, a Chris Paul, a Stephen Curry, all different types of players, but all do that thing. John Wall, in his heyday, did that thing where he will make you better by his mere presence on the court, which is why when I start to look at the NBA draft, I am pretty interested in Anthony Black out of Arkansas. I haven't done a lot of prep yet, and I reserve the right to change my mind. I need to watch some tape. I've started to do some reading and looking at some mocks. And the more reading I do, he's the guy that I think fits the mold. He's big for his position, which is great and is something the Wizards desperately need, is size for position. A guy who hopefully can use his intellect and size to be a plus defender in a team that hasn't had a lot of it. Ironically, the best plus defender they have is also at the point guard position, but you'd ideally like DeLon Wright to be your backup, not your starter. And if he's your backup, you're in great shape. But that's the guy I want because of what he can do offensively. Someone who's going to always keep the ball moving, someone who's going to kind of do the mental math to figure out who needs shots and how do I get this guy shots in this way. Someone who's not going to slow up the game for the sake of having the ball in their hands, who's going to advance it quickly, get the team out in transition, steal points on a regular basis. And then when you have to run stuff in the half court, has the adeptness to do it. Again, I need to watch more of him. But when you talk about that concept, whether it's a point guard or not, Black happens to be a point guard. But when you talk about that concept of get the guy who other people in the league want to play with, that's the guy I've got circled. Obviously, Wembanyama is the best guy in this draft, and everyone's going to want to play with him because he's incredible. Scoot Henderson is a better version of this, and which is why he's seen as a top flight prospect who's going to go second and would go first in basically any other year that Wembanyama wasn't in the draft. But Black out of Arkansas is a guy that he's at 8 in most of these mock drafts for the Wizards, and they are taking him in a lot of these. And I think also, especially with the culture that Winger and Dawkins want to establish, I think he'd be a great fit. Because he's also a piece you can put literally anything else around. You can put a big guy around him. You can put a Bradley Beal around him. You can put a different kind of wing around him. So no matter whether you rebuild, knock it down, you try to add to Beal plus Black plus whatever, he fits. And that's the kind of piece that you want in the 2023 NBA. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And when we get back, it is a Take Command Monday. A couple of mailbag questions. Very interesting, fun discussions between your boy and Logan Paulson. That's next. And then we preview Game 5 in the NBA Finals tonight on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Right now it is time for a little Take Command. Of course, the podcast I do with Logan Paulson, which you can listen to on the podcast feed. Subscribe. It'll be there first thing in the morning. Apple, Spotify, the free Odyssey app, wherever it is that you subscribe to your podcast. Also, I will say, Anthony, this one's worth listening to for a number of reasons. One, really great mailbag questions. The Twitterati did an excellent job of feeding us some good topics. And some of it was like similar topics and stuff that we've talked about, but they just did such a good job of kind of, like framing it in a different way that made us think about it differently. Really appreciated that. I also got kind of frustrated at one point and I cussed. So you want a Hoffman bleep? Logan cusses like every other podcast. He forgets that we're recording on something that's just creating extra work for Nick to have to bleep it. But I apologized to Nick before I did it. But I did it.
Oh, so you knew you were going to curse.
I was just like, bleepity bleep. Sorry, Nick. Nick did get a lot of airtime, though. He's the one who asked the questions. Let's hit it. It's a Take Command Monday here on The Hoffman Show.
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulson and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. What's up? What's happening? I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulson. And with us all episode long. Well, he is always all episode long, but on camera, on mic, all episode long, our producer, Nick Berlansky, because it is a Mailbag Monday. We are going heavy on the mailbag questions. We will do our OTA recap later this week. But, Nick, you fetched a couple of questions out of my Twitter mentions, and let's dive right in, shall we?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to eat my Cheetos like I normally do while watching you guys do the show, but I guess this is also a good alternative. It's nice to actually come out and talk to you guys. But let's start with...
I'm so sorry to ruin your dietary plans.
I know, honestly. I got to stay on a schedule here. Come on, guys. But as Mike asked on Twitter, many reports about how from minicamp is that he had some good and some bad, but does the overall QB room look better than it has in years?
I think yes. I'll just go to let's see, Logan, between the two of us, we have it going all the way back to whatever year you were drafted, 2010, 2011?
Yeah, 2010, yeah.
So, like, because when I got here, that's when you left. Sorry about that. That was totally my fault. Going back to when Cousins and Colt were here, I would say that's probably the best it's been in my era. And a lot of that obviously had to do with Kirk because he's the best quarterback that's been here during this era. And I think Sam could be as good as Kirk. We'll see. Obviously, Kirk's had a very long, successful career. He's never been a top 5 quarterback, but he's been kind of between 10 and 15 probably. And then it spurts even higher than that for the majority of the last 8 years. And I think Colt was seen as a very, very solid backup. So I would say Jacoby's definitely stronger than Colt was as a backup. And then it comes down to what's the difference between Hal and Kirk. And we're obviously not going to know till the middle of the season.
Yeah, I think the other one would be like Alex Smith before he got hurt, because I think also Colt was the backup then as well, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yep.
So that's another interesting room. And obviously the injury there taints it. I think the thing with Sam, and I've been very bullish on Sam through the OTA process. Even the bad days, I've kind of been able to explain away some of that. And I think rightfully so. I think he's had a good OTA period. I think the thing with Sam that makes me kind of back off of like comparing him directly to Kirk or Alex or even Robert when Robert was rolling in 2012 is that he hasn't really done anything yet, and I think that's an unfair comparison. So like as much as like we're optimistic about it, like I don't think you can compare this quarterback room to those quarterback rooms because there's no like body of work to support it yet. And I think we're excited about the upside. Sam's obviously very, very talented. The release, the mobility, kind of this, like modern model of what it is to be a quarterback in the NFL. Live arm, big arm, mobility, escapability, kind of off schedule ability. But he hasn't done it for a long period of time. Like I went back recently last week actually and watched, the Dallas game again from, his last start, and just he wasn't asked to do that much. And you saw the flash, you saw the ability, but it's just not there yet. So in terms of saying, how does this compare to the best quarterback rooms of the last 15 or 17 years? I'm like, let's just pump the brakes a little bit on that because he has to show me. Obviously, I'm really high on Jacoby Brissett. Last year in Cleveland was excellent. I think there's a reason that he's kind of like the best backup in the NFL and never the starter, and I think that has to be considered, but I'm very high on him. I just think I need more information to kind of say, hey, this stacks up with those other rooms that you mentioned, because those guys like Kirk, what was that? You were here in 2015. Like he had played a little bit. He was looking for that next contract. He had stuff under his belt. And to me, that's really valuable as a former player, as an evaluator. Like I need to see you do it for an extended period of time before I give you kind of any anointed ability there.
I know that felt like pushback on what I was saying, but it's not. Mine was more of a reflection of how bad the rooms have been. Like, it's just like, it's how Jacoby Brissett himself is better than most of the rooms that they've had.
Which is crazy, But...
Alex 2018 is an interesting one because they won 6 of 8 before that Houston game where he gets hurt, but he wasn't good. He was averaging like 100... high hundreds yards per game, like not even 200 yards per game, but they just kept winning. But like, that's Alex Smith. He always just knew how to manage the game. And that's something that separates him from Jacoby. Like statistically, Jacoby might be better, but Alex just knew what was needed and made the key plays at the right time and was never afraid to audible into a run play. And, that kept his stats down. Like there's just little quarterbacking professional stuff that Alex did that you just went like, wow, I get it. I get how this dude, everyone always wants to replace him, but he just wins. And obviously the injury then changes all of that. But I think even just Brissett and what he is and what he's done is better than anything they've had for Rivera, probably. Like Fitzpatrick, what we thought he could be was like kind of on this level.
Right.
Because he was coming off a heck of a year in Miami, and then he gets hurt, 15 plays into the season.
Yeah.
And that's the end of his career. Obviously Taylor's played well, but I think both agree that Brissett's better than Heineke.
Yep.
I think it's just they haven't had very good rooms. They've been trying to solve the quarterback position in Washington since Joe Theismann broke his leg. Like, not to be glib about it, but like that's what we're talking about here. They've obviously had very good players for single seasons along the lines, and over time they won 3 Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks. But like that is both amazing and also emblematic of what quarterback has been here. Even when they have been good, they haven't had a definitive answer. And I think that is why they so desperately want someone like Howell to work out, because then you have a couple of years here, which, again, Cousins is the only guy that's done this, where you have like 3 years in a row of the same starter. It hasn't happened. Jason Campbell had a couple of years, Brunell had a couple of years, but there's never been, especially a younger guy who you're like, yep, this is the guy. Campbell was probably the closest of the last like 20 years. And then it was Kirk, and, that never felt solid because of the contract stuff. So, if they can get Howell to be good, that would be amazing. But even with Brissett, you're still looking at one of probably the best room that Rivera's had just by his presence alone.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, Brissett is awesome. I totally agree. And, it really, like you said, there's a lot of excitement, and I think there's like right flow around Sam Howell and what he can be. But, I need to see it. I'm excited what he can be in this Eric Bieniemy offense. But yeah, I do think with Ron and just having Brissett here, he's probably, the most talented quarterback that they've had, which is mind blowing. Because top 15 quarterback last year, and I think that's exciting. So,
and, in fairness to anyone who's screaming at their whatever screen they're watching this on right now, or their phone listening to it, like that assumes Brissett is exactly what he was last year, which is one of his best years. So, like if Brissett is backup Brissett, who's actually not a top 15 quarterback in the league, then this looks very silly in 6 months. So hopefully we don't find out, because Sam's playing great, right. But like, that's at least worth mentioning in the name of objectivity and fairness.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I mean, if you disagree, definitely leave a comment and like why you disagree. Because to me, like when I just step back and look at it, I think the depth is a little bit of a question because Sam hasn't done a whole bunch. But in terms of play, it's hard to argue with. It's hard to argue with a guy who's led starting campaigns. And like, again, he's the best backup in the league for a reason. But I do think that that's something that it's an important variable, especially over the last 4 years since I've been covering the team. Like it's hard for me to say one of those guys that played was better than him. So yeah. But in terms of going back to Kirk, I think Kirk is better, obviously. But like this is a unique situation in terms of upside. We just need to see it actualized.
For sure. All right, Nick. Next one.
Another question on Twitter from Julio Iglesias says, the way the secondary is shaping up, do you see a scenario where Cam Curl doesn't get paid in Washington?
Ooh.
That's interesting because they have so much talent back there. They draft Quan Martin, which kind of is Cam Curl insurance. Plays in the post, plays Buffalo. But I do think that, like, if Cam performs, Ron is in charge, right? Because this is the other variable too, is like, okay, well, what happens if they're not a good football team? Everybody gets blown out, new ownership. Do they just be like, all right, thanks, buddy, go have fun, sign somewhere for lots of money? And whatever new defensive coordinator comes in doesn't have the value on Cam Curl that this defense does. I guess I could say, like, yes, I see a scenario, but I do think that especially if they're good enough that Ron stays around, they've proven they will pay their own if they perform. And I fully expect Cam Curl to perform. So scenario, yes. Likelihood, not high, I guess is how I'd answer that, Logan.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think it's definitely possible they don't pay him. And has he come out and said that he's unhappy or working for an extension? Is that why he didn't participate in the team stuff of OTAs, or is that just
he has not said it. He kind of refuses to say it,
right?
But I think it's largely understood that is kind of where he's at.
Sure. So,
like, I think he understands that he can't get one right now, and it's one of those where it's like, hey man, I'm not going to go out there and get hurt or do something silly. I'll be around. I'll make sure that I'm ready for the season, but like, I'll see y'all in training camp.
Yeah, and I guess the thing I would say is that until we know like what he's asking for, which I'm assuming is top safety money. I would assume. If I'm a GM, and I'm trying to rebut that claim, I would say, Cam, like, you have not performed by any kind of major metric like a top 5 safety. Like, we all know, because we watch this team every single week, that he's a good football player, that he's a good communicator, that he can play multiple different positions, and his value here is extremely high. In terms of the league, I don't know what his value is. And it would seem to me that he'd be one of those guys that would be classically undervalued, like going somewhere else. Like Bates just signed that big deal in Atlanta, and I think that would probably be the benchmark. And I don't remember exactly what the numbers were. It was 44 or something like that. But basically what I'm saying is that I don't think the league looks at him and says, oh, here is like a Reed or a Dawkins or any of these like really dominant safeties that we've seen. And obviously he kind of is a reflection of how the position has changed. He's, a really good tackler, not a big hitter, got a lot of position flexibility, linebacker, nickel, Buffalo nickel, and post safety, which is great. But I kind of say to myself, like, has he had the production? Has he had like those gaudy stats that get those guys those big contracts? And I don't know that he has. And again, if I'm the GM here, because after having seen him, I want him on my football team, and I'm going to do a lot to make that happen. But I'm not sure he deserves to be, top 5 highest paid safety in the NFL.
So obviously PFF is what it is, but he was a second-rated safety in terms of PFF
grade
last year.
In terms of grade,
yeah,
and I agree with that. And I, like, when you look at his play, it's very, very high. But I don't think if GMs were giving contracts based on PFF, I think the league would look very, very different, right?
Right.
I think, like, for example, like Derwin James is considered the best safety in the NFL, and there is a lot of comparisons between the game, the position flex, but Derwin James has like this explosive element to his game that has characterized good safeties throughout the league for a long time. So I know he's the highest graded player, or second highest graded player at PFF in terms of safety. I just don't think that that's how people value safeties. Like, they here, when in safety evaluation, they value the length, they value the ability to match up with the tight end. And I don't know if that metric is kind of a league-wide metric in terms of evaluation. And the position flex, I don't know if that's a league-wide metric in terms of value. So that would be my one pushback on paying him, is that, like, if you let him hit the open market, does he get like a hey, here's a 4-year, $35 million deal. And then you're like, hey, yeah, we'll match that. Kind of like what they did with Lamar in Baltimore. Like, they didn't have a precedent for the deal, the template for the deal. He hits the market, or he doesn't hit the market, but Jalen Hurts signs his contract. It's like, okay, that's the new standard. That's the new market. Here we go.
Right.
And I think like that is something I could see happening potentially here, is that, their value of him here is not reflected by the league. So when he goes out into the market, they get a nice number that they feel good about. They match it. They plus it, whatever they want to do, and get him back.
Yeah. The problem with that is Lamar was a restricted free agent,
Correct.
right? So obviously, if he goes out to the market and another team gives him a deal and they're like, all right, we'll match it, he could just sign the other deal.
He can, but I do think you can sweeten the pot. Like, you've been in maybe you haven't, but like when I was not a very good football player, but I'd get in these situations. Like when I signed in Atlanta, Detroit was also interested. So Detroit put a contract down on the table and said, we'd like you to come here. And when I went on my visit to Atlanta, they basically said, well, we want you more than that, so we'll give you this. And there was a little bit of a bidding war. And we're talking like $5,000. You know what I mean? It wasn't like millions and millions of dollars, but that happens at a large.
Nick and I hear from Radio Moneyland are like $5,000. That's incredible.
Right. But I'm saying it was like, we go up, here, we go up here. And then it was like, eventually one of the parties was like, well, we're not going to go up anymore. Take it or leave it. And I was like, I'll take it because this is way better than what they offered. So I think if I'm his agent, I'm going to tell the Commanders, I know how valuable he is to you. This is the deal. Match it, plus it, whatever Cam wants out of it, and then let's make that happen. And I'm getting my client more money, basically.
Yeah, totally. And obviously we'll see if it gets to that or if there's an extension. I think they would like to get him done. Obviously they want to get him done at their number, but they can't right now because of the ownership situation. So once that clears here in a couple of weeks, hopefully it's one of those where they show up at training camp, they sit down over dinner after the first night of practice and get that done. But we'll see. But back to the original question, like, is there a chance he doesn't sign here? Yes. If he wants top 5 safety money and they're like, no, that's one scenario. And then I think if Percy Butler, Derek Forrest, and, Quan Martin ball out and Jeremy Reeves proves that he's continuously getting better on defense, not just as a special teams ace, then their leverage goes up in that regard. It's like, hey man, like we'll pay you this, but we have good players. So what do you want? I still think they much prefer to just sign him though. So that would, again, there's the scenario, but consider it unlikely.
No, I agree. Yeah, it just depends on where they're at. And we have no idea about the contract right now or what he's asking or what he's thinking. So good job by his camp of keeping that pretty close to the vest. But, maybe they're miles apart in terms of value. And
possible.
That's when he would leave, probably.
For sure. All right, that from Take Command, which is available first thing tomorrow morning in your podcast feed. When we get back here on the Hoffman Show, we will break down the NBA Finals. I should also mention some of the other questions that we address in there. Offensive line, what is the most realistic outcome for them? That was a really, really fascinating conversation. And we also talked about Chase Young and his future with the club. What would it take for the Commanders to ultimately sign off on a trade? That is in the episode of Take Command. So good stuff there that you just heard, but there's more where that came from, which is why you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Again, we are live on YouTube, youtube.com/@theteam980 if you want to watch us. The full episodes of Take Command, though, are over on the Fans YouTube page at 1067 The Fans. So make sure you're subscribed both places if you are a YouTuber. What was the word that Sheehan couldn't say earlier, Anthony? It was... What was it? Now I can't remember.
You put me on the spot, and I failed you.
Facilitator? I think it was facilitator. Yeah.
Maybe.
Facilitator.
I think so.
Yeah.
Actually, no. No, it was facilitator. It was facilitator.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one. It'll get you. Got to watch out for it.
5 syllables, baby.
Facilitator. Checks out.
Yep.
You know what they say? Math be mathin'. Math be mathin'. All right, when we get back, can the Nuggets count to 4? That's the question. It's the Hoffman Show on Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. I got too many wires over here, Anthony. Just stuff going all over the place. And I'm trying to book myself a haircut for tomorrow because your boy, it's out of control. It's bad. We gotta get right. I was trying to wait till a couple weeks from now before are you all right over there, by the way? What's going on?
Oh, no, I thought I had to sneeze for a second, but, I'm all good right now.
I feel like I put you in a bad spot there. All of a sudden, you were going through it off camera, and then I put you on camera, and then you were still going through it because you had already committed to going through whatever you were going through.
Yeah, and then I didn't actually go through what I thought I was going to go through, but now we're here.
And now we're here. The Hoffman Show, and now we're here. I need a haircut. I thought I was trying to make it till right before we're going to Vegas in a couple weeks, and I'm not gonna make it that long. I need a haircut last week, and I'm trying to make it another 2 weeks. What am I doing? So I need to, in this segment, I need to book this haircut. I didn't quite finish it before we got back. So we're gonna do that real quick, and then get on with the show. Tonight, NBA Finals, Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray. By the way, dude with a great haircut. Michael Porter Jr., sharp fade. You notice that? His barber's clearly in Miami.
He always has a nice, haircut.
Yeah. Very, 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 very well done fade.
I feel like him, Jason Tatum, I don't know what it is about their texture of hair, but, they have a really nice texture. Yeah.
Good for them. Can Denver close it out tonight? Of course they can. Will Denver close it out tonight is the question. And to me, this comes, obviously it's going to come down to Miami's shooting. When they've made historic levels of threes, they've won. When not, they've lost. But I also wonder how they play tonight. They have been very, very Bam Adebayo forward, which I think makes some sense. Can you make Jokic defend? But I think what Jokic has proven is the answer is yes. I think people look at him, and I heard JJ Redick talking about this with Doris Burke on his podcast, and there's something about like just his body type and the way it looks on television. He's pale, the whole deal, and he looks like, sorry, this isn't elegant, but chubby, and people assume that he's out of shape and all this kind of stuff. In person, he is like jacked and chiseled, and like there's none of that. There'd be no confusing this for a man who's not in tremendous physical shape. And what he's showing you is even if he's not the fastest guy on the floor, he'll just keep running. Like he's the guy in the marathon who you take off at the start line and you're like, I'll see you, whatever. And then somewhere in like the middle of the race, at the same pace he took off over the starting line while you're slowed down, he just goes right past you. And you're like, I got to keep up with him. And then you realize you can't. He's in tremendous condition. And that also shows with his decision-making. Because one of the things we see in athletes all the time, I've seen this as an analyst, I've seen this as a trainer, is your decision-making goes down. When you're tired, you are not as clear of a thinker, which is why a lot of players make mistakes in big spots. The pressure gets high, you're tired, you do the wrong thing. Jokic just keeps doing the right thing all the damn time. And defensively, that's more than half the battle. Do you make good decisions? Do you put your body where it's supposed to be? And can you get there with whatever kind of speed you need to make a play on the ball or stay in front or do whatever? And Jokic is tremendous at that. So obviously Butler's been able to play like some bully ball when he gets switches on some of these smaller defenders. But I kind of wonder tonight, Anthony, if Jimmy just goes, if I'm going down scoring 50. His ankle seems to be in a better place. Do you think tonight's the night that Butler just tries it? Because if not now, then when?
I mean, personally, I've been rooting for the Miami Heat this entire series. I really wanted them to win, but Denver's just the far better team. Like, it's not even close. I wouldn't go as far as to, call Game 2 a fluke. I do think, Denver being a little lax, Jamal Murray not having the best shooting night. And maybe that was in part to Jimmy's defense, but even, the others, the Michael Porters, the other role players, they didn't come to play either in Game 2. And I just think tonight they're going to come out, acting as if they're the team down, 3-1. They're just going to come out with a sense of urgency to close this And despite, what Jimmy Butler may do, I think he's had a fantastic playoff series run. But I think it ends tonight. I think, the Nuggets put it all together. They leave it all out there on the floor, and they walk away winning their first ever NBA Finals championship.
I agree. I think that there's a maturity to this Denver team that will not see them mess around. Like, they will go in, they will close it out. You saw them hammer Phoenix, and they just kind of broke them. And I don't know that that's the way it goes down tonight, because this Miami team is not going to go out without a fight. That's who they are, for sure. And Spo will have something up his sleeve. If he's been thinking about something, he's going to try it. Tyler Hero's going to get some minutes. It's kind of like, well, now or never. I would expect to see more Duncan Robinson tonight. I think he's been fantastic in the series, and I think Spo knows, like, we got to score 100 points. We can't be doing this where we're scoring 95 against the Denver freaking Nuggets in 2023. Like, that's just not good enough to win. I think Kevin Love sees 25 minutes where he's playing like 16 earlier in the series. I think they're going to play to score. But the question is that Jimmy's got to ask himself, and that Spo's got to ask, and as they collaborate on a game plan, is our best bet for Jimmy to kind of do this similar type of stuff LeBron used to do, where he just junk up a game and be like, I'm going to control every possession, and I hopefully will have 40 and 15 by the time, because my usage rate is going to be 80%. Or do I try to get everyone else involved? Because if Gabe Vincent's not making shots and Max Strus is not making shots, Kevin Love is not making shots, Duncan Robinson is not making shots, then we don't have any chance of winning this game. And it's a tough thing. It's a tough line, because philosophically the better thing is always for everyone to be involved. But I just don't know. I don't know that Miami. I frankly don't think Miami can win either way, as long as Denver's doing what they've been doing. But I do think that Butler has to have a fairly monster night for them to even have a chance, which is why, by the way, if I'm Denver, we're not messing around with stuff tonight. Aaron Gordon is guarding Jimmy Butler every possession they're on the floor together. And I'm probably telling Aaron Gordon, if you can play 44 minutes tonight, you don't have to play basketball again for the rest of the summer. You don't have to touch a ball till training camp. I don't care. Come in whatever shape you want next year. You go out, you guard Jimmy Butler with all your might tonight, and you're going to be an NBA champion, and you're going to have so much off time. That would be my game plan if I was Michael Malone. I would not let it happen, because the way Butler has scored in this series is when he plays bully ball on Murray and KCP and everyone that's not Aaron Gordon.
I feel like the other component that's missing from, the Heat's offense, everybody's been screaming the Heat need to score. Well, guess what? It's hard to score when you're not getting turnovers, and that's what the Nuggets have done so well. They've taken care of the ball, and they just understand, the Heat, and the throughout the playoffs, a lot of their points have come in transition, getting deflections. And again, we don't see Jimmy Butler, having his impact that he usually does on both ends of the floor, because the Nuggets have, taken pride in just taking care of the ball. So that's one thing that will be good to monitor tonight. See if the Heat can get some deflections and some easy points in transition. But also, I'm interested to see what Tyler Hero does. This is going to be his first game back, and they need offense. So if it's not going to come on the defensive end, let's see if we can get it, in that half court executing. And if, Tyler Hero couldn't, be that spark off the bench that he was prior to his injury.
Yeah, the turnovers point is great, and it also, Miami had more turnovers in Game 4 than they had the entire series combined or something. It was crazy, or maybe it was the entire Boston series. They could not hold on to the ball, which is a huge issue. There was something else you said in there that I'm trying to remember. What else did you say? Turnovers,
getting points in transition.
Just trouble scoring for Miami.
Yeah.
Did you see the numbers from 2-point range for them?
Last game or just this series alone?
Game 3 was particularly heinous, but this series overall.
No, I haven't seen it.
So Game 3, obviously, I know there's been a Game 4 since, but they were 20-something% or 30%, high 20s, low 30s from 2, around the rim. Bam was 1 for 10.
Yep.
Jokic, they were 3 for 19 when Jokic was the closest defender. You can't win a series that way. And I think it goes to show that for as much as we love the little guy and for as much as we love to celebrate Stephen Curry for doing the things he's done at his size, the reason we celebrate that is because it's such an anomaly. Size still matters. Like, the entire history of the NBA tells you the big, strong guy is who you want. Now, he's got to be skilled. He's got to be smart. He's got to be competitive. He's got to be able to hit shots. He's got to do all the things. But what can help lead to that is being bigger than the guy that you're guarding or that's guarding you, right? You know, from Bill Russell and the things he was able to do to Wilt to, Magic Johnson, size for position, Larry Bird, size for position, Michael Jordan at 6'6" at two guard. That became the prototypical, but like, it was a smaller league before that where Jordan was like, I'm 6'6" and I can demolish all of you. Obviously, there's so much more to it than that. LeBron James, part of the reason he's LeBron James is he's 6'8", somewhere in his career between 240 and 280, depending on what version of LeBron we're talking about. Like, he's a freight train. And when you have that ability to just be bigger and cause problems with your sheer size before you even get to your skills and talent, like, that is problematic for another team. And when you have that compounded, like, okay, one bigger guy is one thing, but when you're bigger at literally every position on the floor, that's a huge issue for a team. And that was Miami. Miami's a small team. It's why they have to play Kevin Love more, who's a good basketball player. But I think they would love to play like that Caleb Martin at the 4 lineup. They can't in this series. He's 6'5". Aaron Gordon eats him alive. Like, KCP's like 6'5". You can't have your 4 be the size of their 2. And so I think that's a huge, like, unsolvable issue for Miami. And for as much as I think it's been fun to watch this series, I think we've had really good hoop. You've had a lot of competitive first halves, and Denver kind of slowly chips away and then pulls away with a run late in the fourth. That's who these teams are. Denver's been the best team in the NBA all year. They deserve to win the NBA title, and I think ultimately they will tonight. You with me, Anthony?
I'm with you, dog.
Okay. All right. We'll either be eating crow and talking about can Miami pull it off tomorrow, or we will be contextualizing a Denver Nuggets championship. We get back. God, I sent you so much stuff this weekend. You sent me so much stuff this weekend. That means we got a jam-packed Real Things, Real People Said into Real Microphones. Next, to close out the show here on the Team 980. Hoffman Show on Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And you had like a whole choreography going there for a second.
Yes, sir. That's that New York dancing rubbing off on me, man. That Get Light. Have you ever seen someone get light?
I mean, I there's a very good chance I have, and I didn't know that's what it was called.
Oh, that's probably what it is. I'll send you a video so you know.
Yeah. Like I'm on the internet, but different parts of it.
Yeah.
So like occasionally cool dance trends might make their way across my feed,
and you might not know what it is.
But I'm like, look at them rascally kids. I'm 152 years old.
Things.
We're not gonna be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11, not very good.
Set into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
All right, we got some doozies today. We got a couple of great baseball ones. Let's give Sue her flowers though first. Actually, so Sue Bird, jersey retired this weekend against the Mystics of all teams. Of course, Sue Bird's wife is Megan Rapinoe, U.S. Women's National Team star, one of the greatest players of her generation. Talk about a power couple. And to get the festivities started, they had Megan introduce Sue.
I love you so much. Congratulations on arguably the best career that anyone has ever had in the history of any sport ever. Let's get this party started.
First of all, she's correct. 21 years, 4 championships. I believe she won MVP 4 times as well. I got to check. Like, her and LeBron's resumes are so absurdly similar. It's crazy. Crazy how similar they are. But also, Anthony, did you pull your goat noise that you made on the show one time so we can compare it to Pino's?
I did not, and I purposely did not because I was sick that day, so I wanted to give a live goat noise.
Well, hold on. Let me kill the music. Anthony, here's Pino. And Pino wins. Oh, no.
That's what happened when a goat dies.
Yeah. Which is what happened last time, too. Oh. So unfortunate. Speaking of unfortunate, let's go to Yankee Stadium. Actually, I don't know if this was home or away. But John Sterling, the longtime 80-something-year-old broadcaster for the New York Yankees. The Yankees win. That guy wasn't ready for a foul ball.
Now the 3-2 swung on. A pop foul back here.
Ow! Ow!
Oh, no.
It really hit me. I didn't know it was coming back that far. So once again, it'll be a 3-2. And Holmes ready to deal. A ground ball at the third. Donaldson squares, throws to first in time. Ball game over. Yankees win. The Yankees win. You know, that foul ball actually hit me. It kind of glanced off my forehead. So I took one for the team.
Have you seen the video, Ant?
Yes.
How does he not, I don't want to. John Sterling is a legend. One of the greats of all time. Hall of Famer. I have no idea if he's a good dude or not, but I never heard anything bad that I can remember. He's a bit of a caricature of himself because of the, people have had fun with that over the years. But the man is 80 years old. I do not want to make fun of an 80-year-old for getting hit with a baseball. However, John, sir, legend. How did you not see it?
I don't know.
Because it comes right, he doesn't move. And then the ball enters the frame and in doing so hits him in the face.
I admire his courage.
It's not like he was getting ready to duck or dodge. I mean, I don't even want to play it again, but like.
And now the 3-2 swung on, a pop foul.
Nothing.
Back here.
Ow. Ow. Ow.
It really hit me. I didn't know it was coming back.
John,
that
I don't
far.
think anybody was doubting that. He clearly did not think it was coming back that far. I don't get how there was nothing, and then it's like it surprised him. It's like the ball came out of the ceiling. It didn't. He was watching it. I don't know.
I ain't got the answers, Greg.
I'm just glad John's okay.
Yes.
We don't need to participate in any kind of elder abuse. And then there's Steven Scotch. Steven, I apologize if I'm saying your name incorrectly. Steven's a pitcher for University of Virginia's baseball team. They're doing quite well at the moment, or at least they were at the time of this interview. And this was Steven, just part of Steven's post-game interview the other day. This is what this segment was made for.
Here's one last one for you.
Yeah, no problem.
Oh, no, that's not the right one. We want, hold on. We want this one.
You know, you walk into a stadium, 8,000 people, they all want you to lose. But as long as you got your 26 guys ready to kick ass or kick butt, you're going to be all right. Sorry, I sweared. I shouldn't have
No,
sweared.
you're good, man. Let's go back to that last inning, 9th inning. What are the emotions like entering that inning?
Well, emotions are go in, win. I heard a fan offer free Dippin' Dots if I blew it, which the price of Dippin' Dots with inflation is just unreal. So for a brief moment, I was like, damn, Dippin' Dots sound good. But also I thought in the back of my head, we win today, we win tomorrow, or tonight. We're going to be here another day. That's more per diem. So that means I can buy my own Dippin' Dots.
That's math. I'd be mathing right there.
That dude is actually hilarious.
I can buy my own Dippin' Dots and be a winner. That's what he said.
I think it's also funny, like, when you're funny without trying to be funny.
Yeah.
I think that's the best.
Yeah. And I think that might be that guy. He just is kind of a different cat. And the rest of us are like, oh, you're a different cat. Anthony, when was the last time you had Dippin' Dots?
Dang, the last time I had Dippin' Dots? Maybe when I went to Hershey Park when I was like 17 or like 16 maybe. I don't.
Yeah,
it's been
I can't
a long
remember.
time.
I, for whatever reason, always associate Dippin' Dots with going to minor league baseball games as a kid. We had the Greenville Braves in town before they left. Now we have the Greenville Drive. So we used to have the Braves affiliate. Now we have the Red Sox affiliate in my hometown. And they had Dippin' Dots at the games. And I feel like my mom would let me get them there. But every other place, she's like, no, you can get different something. So I think I'm going to go Greenville Braves Stadium. I was like 12. All right, that's our radio show for today. We'll see you tomorrow, and BetMGM Tonight is next.